I remember I walked up into St James's and my hands, everything, my whole body just lit up. I've got goosebumps all over my...
I get those goosebumps. I get those goosebumps every time you come around. You're on mine, you make everything feel fine. Worry about those comments, I'm way too numb, yeah. It's way too dumb, yeah. I get those goosebumps every time. I need the hype, go that.
Hello, welcome to Loaded Mag NUFC, the Monday special. We're back for another fully loaded transfer show, people. So we're going to get into it very, very shortly. Ben is on his way. I'll be here in just a few short minutes. So we're going to have a little bit of a chat. But Chris, how are you on this fine Monday evening, mate?
I'm very good, mate. Very good. Sitting pretty on 6 wins. There was no reason, is there? There was no reason to feel glum, apart from the fact, Pete, that I was back in work today. Apart from that reason.
Same.
Oh, mate, it was so weird. Like I was sitting in a team meeting today virtually, and I was just like, "How have I got? Like, where did those 2 weeks go? Where did they go?" So it was weird being back. Yeah, it was. It was nice seeing my team and stuff like that. But at the same time, I was a bit like, oh, because I was used to waking up and being like, "What shall I do today? Where should we go? What should we do?" Whereas today, it was very much, "Yeah, you need to work." But other than that, mate, I am good. Obviously, really looking forward to the Arsenal match. And there was a little bit of news. Well, I say a little bit of news today. I know you mentioned it a while back, didn't you? You said that Arteta had confirmed it a while back. But I'm sure we'll touch on that at some point. But yeah, I'm good, mate. I'm good. How are things with you? You okay?
Yeah, same. Other than work, mate. Other than work, being back today, going back to the slog again. But other than that, I'm all right. It's like you said, feeling good at the moment. 6 wins in a row. Big semi-final coming up tomorrow. No reason not to feel good at this moment in time, especially if you're a Newcastle United fan. And look, I think the key thing is that I think we're getting really close to moving day. Now, if anyone's a golf fan, you'll know what moving day is, particularly if you watch the big ones, the big events. Moving day is very much known for where things start to ramp up. And I think they are in the transfer goings on. I think we're going to start to see it in the next few days to the next week on how things are going to move forward. So look, we'll 100% will be getting into all of that. But there's a few things that I wanted to throw at you, Chris, a few things that have been going on sort of in the world of Newcastle United recently. So I think it's important that we kind of have a look at one or two bits. And one of them that you brought to my attention that's been going around in it's in the striker's position, mate. And you mentioned it, we talked about it earlier. Dharma Chef, friend of the channel, was on in the summer with us. 4 Premier League clubs have approached Jonathan David's camp over a pre-contract agreement. David is out of contract in the summer and can talk to clubs outside France. 2 Serie A clubs have made offers. David's focus is on Lille and will assess all of his options. So 4 Premier League clubs have approached Jonathan David's camp. What do you make of that? And in your opinion, are Newcastle United one of them?
You know what, we briefly spoke about it, didn't we, pre-show, Pete? And I think for me, I think it would be naive if we weren't. You know, his contract ending in the summer is a great opportunity for us to go and replace Callum Wilson, potentially with a free transfer. I suppose my biggest thing when I read this today, my biggest thing was, or my ultimate feeling was, do we try and get him in January? Do we go to Lille with a transfer offer to try and ward off all of that competition? Because ultimately, if it's true what Darmish is saying, I'm obviously not saying it's not true, but if what Darmish is saying is correct, and 4 Premier League clubs are in for him, 2 Serie A clubs are in for him, and that's what we know of, there could be more. Do we want to try and steal a march on our rivals and go to Lille and go 10 million? You know, and some people may go, oh, 10 million for 5 months. Ultimately, you know, if we can get him in early, and you know, be able to speak with him now, in terms of doing a transfer this month, would that not be you know, a good opportunity for us to do that? Because the only problem is in the summer, if his contract does run out, or if he chooses to, you know, stay at Lille until the summer, he's basically got the choice of his clubs, and I'm assuming he's going to want a very, very big salary, as well as a signing on fee. Yeah. So I suppose that would be my question, Pete. But really, due to the quality of striker, I think it's safe to say he's a great age, is he not? Is he about 25, Jonathan David?
24, yeah.
Mate, and he, you know, decent goal scoring record, obviously Canadian international, but he's doing the business at France in the French league, Ligue 1. I think signing someone like him, even for a paltry 10 million, if we were to try and do a deal with Lille to try and force that through, maybe, you never know, maybe the representatives or the board at Lille would say, oh, listen, you know, let us get some money back on you, and maybe try and force his hand and see if he'll come. But that's what I would do, Pete. But in the summer, obviously, yeah, I'm sure we'll be around the table, and I would hope that we're one of the 4 clubs.
Yeah, definitely. We have to. We've been linked for so long with Jonathan David, and it's maybe one to ask Ben when he comes on very shortly, because Ben was someone that did report on Jonathan David way back when. So for me, it's a no-brainer. We have to be in for someone like Jonathan David. He is a top striker, playing at the top of his game right now. We have to make sure we're looking at him. And you know, Darmish saying there's 4 clubs interested in him. Newcastle United need to be one of them. For me, I'd be looking at January. I'd be, you know, yes, he's going to be on a free in 6 months' time, but there's going to be a lot of teams with a lot of money going to be able to put down big wages and big signing on fees for him. Let's slap 20 million down on him. You're going to be paying more than that probably to replace Callum Wilson anyway. Go slap 20 million down to Lille and go, you know what? There's 20 million here on the table. Take it now. Let's do the deal. Let's get him out now. And ask the question, why not? That shows your intent. It shows you want the player, and you're offering some money there, some money that other teams probably haven't got the ability to put on the table, and only put you in a strengthening position. Let's not forget, mate, a few years ago, we did the same with Bruno Guimaraes. We signed Bruno because Arsenal and other teams couldn't. They didn't have the money to. Why can't we go do that again? Let's go get a signing, someone like him, bring him in. Yes, we've got Callum Wilson still for another 6 months, but we're probably not going to see him till the end of Feb, if we're lucky. So let's get someone in that can come and play now. Absolutely. Let's try and make this deal get done. But we'll revisit that when Ben comes on. We'll ask that question. So people in the chat, Chris, remind us, and we'll throw it at him again. Another interesting link. Another player that's got 6 months left on his contract, mate. 6 months left on his contract. Newcastle are considering a January move for Kyle Walker-Peters. Now, anybody knows Loaded Mag NUFC, it's a player that myself, Chris, and Daz have talked about for about a year and a half now. You know, he's right back, can play left back, used to be at Tottenham, was signed by Southampton. Was surprised he stayed with them in the Championship, if I'm honest with you, but he did. They got promoted. And yes, Southampton are having a really bad season, but again, he's a very, very consistent performer. A very consistent performer. So for me, I think it'd be a really good addition to get someone like him in. But Again, he's another one that can sign a pre-contract agreement, mate. But, would you be looking at a pre-contract agreement with the summer? Would you be looking at maybe giving a deal now? Or, I'm going to put this out here for you, Chris, would you not consider it at all and keep Kieran Trippier? There's a few caveats there with the situation. Where with this potential deal or is looking at him, how do you see that one? How do you see it going?
Do you know what? That one's even more interesting. And I hadn't realised he was on a free in the summer. It didn't. I obviously didn't spot that. But that is incredibly interesting piece because, for two reasons. One, you've already mentioned Kieran Trippier. Ready-made replacement coming in, an understudy to Tino Livramento, a very capable understudy who, if any avid Loaded Mag watchers out there will remember, we had Mike on, Southampton fan, Vlogs, I believe, is the channel. Go watch Mike. He's brilliant, by the way. We had Mike on, and this was about 2 years ago, maybe. And we were linked with Kyle Walker-Peters, and the price we were being quoted, Pete, if you remember, was 50 million. 50 million pounds Mike wanted for Kyle Walker-Peters. So to have the opportunity to potentially bring him in for a fraction of that price is again, stealing a march on others rather than waiting until the summer. But also, not only that, does that not also, Pete, my second point is, does that not also free up any concerns that Eddie Howe has over letting Matty Target go? Because we know he's more than capable of playing the left back as well. So you could potentially lose Kieran Trippier and Matty Target, and you're bringing in Kyle Walker-Peters, who is equally adept on either the right or the left. If that's not good business sense, I don't know what is. Because Kyle Walker-Peters, I think predominantly is a right back, but he has played at left back, a bit like Tino Livramento. We know Tino Livramento couldn't do a job there. We know Kieran Trippier has done a job there for England. Having wing backs who can play either side, it's good, isn't it? And again, tell me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure Kyle Walker-Peters is around 27. He's not. Yeah, he's around that age, isn't he? He's not approaching his 30s by any stretch. I'll have to double check that now. Yeah,
I think he's 27, mate.
27. Yeah. So it's a shrewd bit of business, and if it means you can release two players, potentially bringing in money for Kieran Trippier, maybe a nominal fee for Matty Target, or let Matty Target go out on loan. Yeah, it's a great shout from Kenosis. Matty Target he'd do a decent job at Southampton. He would. That's probably around the level that he'd probably be looking at, Matty Target.
Yeah,
it's an interesting one, very very interesting one. What do you think, Pete?
I think it'd be a real smart deal to get. I think Kyle Walker-Peters will want to be playing a club that's fighting higher up in the table. I actually think he's good enough to. I actually think I think Kyle Walker-Peters is a top 10 fullback. A top 10 fullback for sure. And at 27 years old, it's a good age. It's a good age. We'll put the figure out. It's a good age. For me, Jason, he's a good player. He might not be an Isaac. You might not do what Isaac does for you, Jason, but he's a good player. But
he's an example, isn't he, Pete? He's an example of like a Dan Burn. When we brought in a Dan Burn, when we brought in, I'm trying to think of another player who came in and kind of like did a job but didn't excite us. I'm trying to think of another player who brought one. Matt Target. Yeah, came in, did a job. Yeah.
So he is like that, and he does the job. And let's not forget, he's played with Tino Livramento. They used to chop and change on the right and left back all the time when Tino was there. They played together, so they know each other's game. I think it'd be a decent sign. And let's not forget, boys, we're fighting for European football. So if we get what we want this season and play European football, whatever European football it is, you're going to want a squad with a player like him, because he'll be able to play for you in Europe and do a job. Like, you want options when you're wanting to give players rest and manage minutes and all the rest of it. You want someone that's capable of coming in, who's very attack-minded, likes to get forward, create opportunities, but very astute defensively. It's a great option. The only thing for me, mate, is I really don't want to lose Kieran Trippier right now. I really
Yeah,
don't want to lose Kieran
I know you mentioned that.
I feel like, honestly, I don't know what you feel like. I don't know what others feel like in the chat. I genuinely feel like Kieran Trippier is back. I think he's back to his best. Now, I think I haven't seen him play as well as he has done recently in the games that he has played since the season we finished fourth. I haven't seen him play as well as that for that long period of time. But he seems settled. He seems focused. Don't be surprised to see him play tomorrow night, and don't be surprised to see him wear the armband when without Bruno, which will be, I think, a big moment for him because he was captain before Bruno took the reins of this season. Don't be surprised to see that happen. And I just think, whilst we've got that, let's harness that. Let's not disrupt it. Let's harness that. And him and Tino have got a real good understanding right now with one coming in, one coming out. They're both playing well. I just don't want to rock the boat in that situation. But if Kyle Walker-Peters wants to wait till the summer, I'd gladly snap him up. On a free. Wouldn't be huge wages, more than probably what you would normally pay in a transfer fee, but that's standard with a free transfer. You're still saving money even if you pay him a little bit more. Yeah, absolutely. Trippier is back. So that's my only thing that's kind of stopping me in my pursuit of someone like Kyle Walker-Peters. But
Pete, just to add in as well, I thought Brian Hall made a really good point. Only clubs abroad can sign pre-contract agreement in January for Kyle Walker-Peters, and you're right saying that, Brian. If the player, another Premier League club can't agree a pre-contract agreement, that's why I think Liverpool are a little bit nervous over Trent Alexander-Arnold, obviously because Real Madrid are approaching Liverpool. But say, for example, us, and don't make this a story, anyone. But if we wanted to sign Trent Alexander-Arnold, we couldn't speak to him in January because he's from another Premier League club. So that's a really good point. That is a really good point that Brian's made there.
Yeah, definitely. So, that's one to keep an eye on. That's one that maybe strengthens our position because we'll probably still be looking in the summer. And it means that any other Premier League team won't be able to snap him up. But does that mean that a fee's going to come in? Let's be honest, Southampton are going down. Does Southampton go, right, let's cash in now. Let's get some money for him because we might need it to strengthen for the Championship season next year. There's a little similar situation with Tyler Dibling as well. Do they look at that now rather than losing potentially for nothing? Do they try and gain some money back? It's an interesting question to ask there. I want to get your thoughts on this one. I think it's been starred a couple of times actually, but I'll find it from our spanner. I think Villa James as well has put it in. News tonight that Chelsea are looking to sign Mark Guehi in January. Remember, he was a Chelsea player. That's who Palace signed him from. There is a buyback clause from Chelsea that they can buy him back for a particular price. What are your thoughts on this one, Chris? Are you surprised? Are you annoyed? Are you even bothered? How are you feeling about the potential? It's looking like, and I think James has put it again. And again, this is another one to ask Ben when he comes on, and he'll be on shortly. Just dropped a message. Chelsea want to sign Crystal Palace in England centre-back Mark Guehi, and he's saying that Sky Sports are reporting it now. Where are you at, fella, with it?
To say I'm not bothered sounds bitter, I suppose, but I'm not overly concerned, is what I'd say. And but personally, I must say, I think Mark Guehi would be mental to go to Chelsea, if I'm being honest. They've got that many centre-backs, and yes, he was originally there, and I'm sure if Chelsea did spend a hell of a lot of money on him, you would like to think or hope that he would come in as first choice. But with such an array of centre-backs that they've got, just off the top of my head, I'm thinking, they've got Badia Shield, they've got Colwill, they've got Fofana. Maybe this news has come from Fofana being ruled out potentially for the whole season. Apparently he's going to be out again for the whole season, which isn't looking good for him. But yeah, they've got a lot of centre backs. Chelsea. I think we saw the image, didn't we? We were talking about it before the season started, and there was a picture of like Chelsea's squad, and I think they had something stupid like 11 centre backs, and that was before even Guehi's potentially coming in. So I don't know. I mean, Trevor Chalobah was one of them. Obviously, he's gone to Palace, but Yeah, do you know what? For the price being talked, and for the amount, I think it would be difficult. I think it would be. I find it difficult to see Mark Guehi in a black and white shirt. Now, I kind of feel like that ship's passed, if I'm honest. And I think the hierarchy at Newcastle are probably prioritising other positions. You could argue that goalkeeper has now become more prominent, particularly if something happens, which I know we're going to probably talk about shortly. And also, obviously, the right wing, which we all know is a big deal. And let's not forget, Pete, as we've already kind of briefly spoken about, if we have any outgoings that we weren't necessarily expecting, for example, a Sean Longstaff, a Kevin Trippier, we've just been talking about Kyle Walker-Peters, that could then force the club to go, right, we need a replacement. We need a replacement right back. We need a replacement central midfielder. That could take us down a different path. Yeah, I think it's a shame. I think Mark Guehi would have been a good signing for Newcastle, but I did. You and Daz know this. I did have a little bit of an issue with the price when we were talking 60, 70. It did worry me a little bit. Now, who was it in the chat? Let me find it. Sorry, Pete, I'll just nick this.
No,
yeah. Villa James says Chelsea will get 25% off on Mark as well, because obviously they've got that buyback. I think, was it?
Yeah. No, I was going to say it's not a buyback. I think David Cook just put it in there, and he's absolutely right. I didn't mean buyback when I said it. I meant like they have a sell-on clause, so whatever Palace selling for, they get a 20% of that fee. And the reason why I said the reason why I say that would probably. It would probably make more sense for Chelsea to get more of a better deal for him, is because one of the things that any club would do if they've got a sell-on clause for him is that they'd waiver that to Palace. They'd say, "Yep, you don't need to give us that. Just lower the fee." Because let's be honest, if Chelsea are buying him, they're going to get 20% back anyway. So whatever it is, they're going to get that chunk of money back. So rather than do that, they're just going to say, right, lower the price and we'll take him cheaper. I think Mark Guehi would go there. Of course, he would go back to Chelsea, fighting in European football, which is where he'd want to be. But I think you're right. There's a massive question mark there with Chelsea, because I just think that they've got so many centre backs. I mean, I've just looked at Tosin Adarabioyo's stats. He's only started 7 games this season, and he was bought there on a free. Like, you've got to be looking at Tosin's situation. Tosin was being talked about as a possible England candidate at centre back, and he's barely kicking the ball. You can see him. You can see he's frustrated on the bench. Whenever you watch Chelsea, he's always on the bench, and he's always in and around the celebrations or in and around the end of game where people are shaking hands, and he just looks glum. And you're thinking, why the hell did you go there when you could have been starting and playing regular for Newcastle United? Yeah. And I just think it's crazy. But look, I'm not overly fussed, I have to be honest, with Mark Guehi, just because if we were to go for him, it would be he would be the more expensive signing. I love him as a player. I think he's really good. I think he's got lots to offer as if he came to Newcastle United. But I'm with you, Chris. I think the more you're looking at that deal now, the less likely it is to happen. And I think with the centre backs that we've been linked with, and it's another question that we're going to come to Ben with, and Ben's going to be coming on any second. In fact, I said any second. Here he is, so let's bring him in. Welcome in, Ben Jacobs. How you doing, Ben?
Good evening, gents. How are you?
Very good, very good. We've just been talking transfers ourselves, because there's been lots of rumours and speculations around various different players, which I'm sure we'll throw at you very shortly. But I just wanted to just a really quick word on Newcastle United and the fact that, the football that we're playing at the moment, 6 in a row, confidence is sky high. A very contrasting thought to when we sort of last speaking at the beginning of the season, end of the summer. What have you made of Newcastle United's turnaround in marching up the table?
Yeah, I think they've been brilliant, haven't they? And we've known for a while that when Alexander Isak scores goals, or players stay fit, or they keep clean sheets at the back, they've got this in them. But it's not just about a run of wins and clean sheets. They're beating teams comfortably. They out-muscled and dominated Manchester United, particularly in that first half. It was a really decent win against a Spurs side that actually played well in that game. They thrashed Villa. They comfortably won away at Ipswich, which you'd expect them to do, but nonetheless, they had no possibility in that game because of how clinical they were and how early they first scored in the game of an upset being on the cards. And I think that's the hallmark of a team now that have played under this manager and a squad that have had several seasons together. They can find a way through adversity. They can manage out games, and they can find breathing space when they need to, which has all led to this run. So it's very exciting. And I think that if they can continue this momentum now beyond the festive period, especially with fifth place likely to be a qualifier for the Champions League, and that's where Newcastle are at the moment, they've got a very realistic chance of getting Champions League football, and that changes the complexion of the summer and the transfers and the players, of course, that they want to hang on to. So they're the form side at the moment in the Premier League. My only kind of nagging doubt is just that it's one of those seasons, isn't it, where seconds to pretty much 8th or 9th is so tight at the moment that you can kind of go from hero to zero and then back to hero again with these little string of results. So now I think it's going to be a bit of a strange lull in the season in many ways, because the next Premier League game isn't till Wolves on January the 15th. The semi-final against Arsenal is massive. All attention is turned to that because, as Newcastle fans have consistently said to me, winning a trophy at a club like Newcastle, so important. They've already beaten Arsenal once this season. They got the second leg at home at St James's Park. So that's a massive focus. Then you rotate against Bromley in the FA Cup, and then you return again. So it's really important in the pause that they don't lose momentum, because after that, you get into mid-January and you think Wolves at home, they should win. Bournemouth at home, they should win. Southampton away, you'd put your mortgage on them winning. Fulham at home, they should win. And if you get to that February the 1st period, regardless of the difficult run where they've got to play Man City and Liverpool and so on, if you get to February the 1st and this win run is continuing, and it should in the Premier League on paper, that's when they'll have breathing space. That's when, if they won all those games, they'll probably be third in the table. They'll probably have a 4 or 5 point cushion in terms of Champions League football. And then you start thinking, okay, they're going to get over the line. So it's a weird one, because normally we say with teams April, May, and if you're chasing Champions League, April in particular, to give yourself a chance in that last 3-4 games. But it feels to me now like these winnable games heading into February the 1st might actually, in hindsight, prove to define Newcastle's season.
Absolutely. We have got some really winnable fixtures, particularly for the fact that they're winnable is that they're at St James's Park, and we have been so much better at St James's Park, and all the reason that you've said, Ben, I absolutely agree. It's a really pivotal time, and with it being the January transfer window, it's become even more pivotal in that period of time, because look, we've talked about it before. We talked about it in the summer, Ben. Newcastle United fans, the players, I think the club are desperate to see new faces come in to freshen up the squad, give that little extra little bit of stardust to add to this squad and give something a little bit different. But there's a lot of conflicting reports out there at the moment. So we'll start with the man that's sort of turned everything around at the moment in goal, and it's Martin Dubravka. So with his situation, he's come back in from Nick Pope being injured. He's been sensational in goal, I have to say. He's been very, very good, in particular on Saturday, making some big saves and commanding his area. However, what's been lingering on is that this link with Saudi. And it has been reported from 1 or 2 sources, but in particular this source here, saying that the deal was agreed. And this was, a week and a half ago. And then it's been saying that, at this point, that Martin Dubravka could potentially leave after the Arsenal game, which is tomorrow night. Craig Hope's already also reported on it. It seems like, from his opinion, it's a case of when, not if, Martin Dubravka leaves for Saudi. But from your perspective, Ben, what do you know about this potential situation with Martin Dubravka? Is he going to leave? Is he likely to stay? How do you see it, and what do you know?
Yeah, I think that the agreement between Newcastle and Al Shabab has been in place for Dubravka, at least verbally, like it was for Miguel Almiron, don't forget, for quite some time. But it has been about getting that player buy-in. And it's still an ongoing situation and a fluid one because, like you've just alluded to, he's come into the side and he's done very well. But Al Shabab are pushing. There's complications, again, as we're finding with a lot of Saudi teams, because they've got their foreign quota full at the moment. So they are going to have to manufacture some outgoings. You've also got Mario Lemina, who they really want too. So right now you've got Wesley Hote, you've got Gonzalo Cuellar, I believe. You have Abdul Razak Hamdallah, who's still there. Yannick Carrasco is playing for Al Shabab. I think Christian Cuenca is still there, at least for now, and Kim Song-Gui as well. And then Daniel Podence, and on loan at the moment from Zenit is Robert Renan. So you can only have 8 foreigners plus 2 who are 21 or younger. So 10 in total, but 8 in a matchday squad and effectively 8 of any age. So if Al Shabab want Dubravka plus Lemina, they're going to have to pick one or the other, or they're going to have to get rid of a player. So it is a little bit complicated, but from Shabab's point of view, goalkeeper is a top priority, and the Dubravka deal, if you like, verbally between clubs predates the one of Lemina. Now, Lemina from Wolves wants to go. He's pushing very hard. He's already spoken to Daniel Podence, ex-Wolves, who's there as well. But to get both of them in, they're going to have to push some players out as well. And another thing is, when this deal was done for Dubravka, again, only between clubs and verbally, it was at the point when it started with Victor Pereira. And now Fatih Terim, the Turkish legendary manager, has come in, and Shabab were not expecting that. So again, there's been a slight shift, and they're waiting to see what the new manager input is. So there is a realistic chance that he goes to Saudi Arabia. It probably will be Al Shabab, but these deals are funded centrally. So Shabab, for example, were front runners for Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang. They spoke to the player. The player said, great, I'm moving. Shabab sent him a letter with all the details, all the finances. It was all stamped with their logo on. Player agreed. And then when it came to the signature, it all just changed overnight to Al Qadsiya. So I'm always a little bit reticent about naming the Saudi clubs, because weirdly, they come right at the very end of the process when they are central deals. But Dubravka exit, I think, is realistic. I think if he goes anywhere, it will be Saudi Arabia. And from Newcastle's point of view, if they lose him, then that's likely to have a knock-on effect where perhaps they move for a player like James Trafford.
Just before we come to James Trafford, because that's a perfect segue, Ben. But just on Martin Dubravka, there's been lots of speculation on social media and various other sources with regards to a fee. Some even quoted maybe as high as 8 million. Is that anything that you've heard in terms of a fee? Is it something lower? Where are you seeing this, and what do you know?
Yeah, I think it's actually $8 million, not pounds. That's my understanding. Right. So it's between 5 and 6 million quid if we do the conversion off the top of my head. And part of that is because of the player and the contractual situation, and part of it is that you're not dealing with a PIF club. So the central deals tend to allocate big money to big players or to the PIF clubs. And technically, the pool is central and could be split evenly. But what you find is the likes of Al Shabab and Al Ittifaq, Steven Gerrard's club, they struggle to get as big a budget. So this isn't going to be a break the bank kind of deal, but it might prove to be one that suits all parties. And if you get 5-6 million in for Dubravka, then you're a third of the way to your fee for a younger goalkeeper like James Trafford. And that all suggests that we might see a goalkeeper or even 2 goalkeepers go out. And thanks to Foxy for doing the exact maths as well, although it will change tomorrow and the next day and the next day when you convert. And that's always the problem with these things. But anyway, I think the point I want to make is maybe 1 goalkeeper leaves, maybe 2 goalkeepers leave. But obviously, if 1 leaves, then 1 will almost certainly come in. And the last point on Dubravka is, although the club's hierarchy are willing to let him go if the player wants that kind of challenge, we should be very clear here that Eddie Howe has never wanted Dubravka to leave. Eddie Howe is Dubravka's biggest fan. Eddie Howe loves the idea that Dubravka can compete against Nick Pope. And because goalkeepers can't be rotated week in, week out, or aren't, it's difficult, and you have to be much more understanding of a number 2 goalkeeper who says, hang on a minute, I've got the financial opportunity of a lifetime and I'm going to play every single week. And it's probably not going to come round again for a player like Dubravka at his age. But even when Dubravka went on loan to Manchester United, Eddie Howe was also against that move. And there was nobody more pleased to see Dubravka return from Manchester United. So I think if it was solely up to Howe, he'd say, let's just keep Dubravka, let's let other goalkeepers go, let's bring in a young goalkeeper in the long run, because Nick Pope might not last forever. But Dubravka's kind of the perfect number 2 for Eddie Howe. But you got to respect the fact that if this Saudi money comes calling and he can play week in, week out, maybe even play in the Asian Champions League, depending on where they qualify this season, that sort of opportunity is once in a lifetime. And I think if Dubravka says, okay, I want that opportunity, I don't see Newcastle standing in their way, which is why the club-to-club agreement has actually, in this case, come before the player agreement.
Yeah. It's a fair bit of money for a 35, 36-year-old. If it is, in fact, as Foxy said, 6.4 million, could well change, as Ben is quite rightly said as well. But again, it's good money. It's money that the club can't turn away. And Eddie Howe said in his press conference today, it's going to be sort of more of business decisions taken over rather than footballing decisions. And I think that's what he was referring to, is that the money on offer is going to far outweigh anything of what the player is currently doing at the club right now. But you've touched on a potential alternative, and it has been talked about quite a lot, is that James Trafford is a player that Newcastle United have looked at. We talked about it, Ben, in the summer. There was interest, even reports of a bid for James Trafford. But it's started to ramp up again. There's lots of different sources that have talked about it, but it has been reported that we are, as it said by Lee Ryder, back in the mix for James Trafford. What are the chances that of Burnley potentially releasing him in a January window when they're on a championship march and he seems to be playing week in, week out? Is there, or in your opinion, is there an opportunity to sign him?
Yeah, I think there is an opportunity to sign him, and I think the player is not necessarily intent on staying at Burnley, promotion or no promotion. And again, this is the advantage of, if you get to the summer and it becomes a summer saga, you have the ability potentially as Newcastle, it can work both ways, of course, but to say we've got European football as well. And that is a big point of difference. And we know that Newcastle's wage structure is not going to quite be like the Big Six, but you're still going to get a wage hike comparative to Burnley as well. So the financials are better, the infrastructure is better, the squad standing is better, the potential for regular European football is better, and the long-term pathway to being a number 1 is better because of the age of Nick Pope and half of the other goalkeepers currently at Newcastle as well, who are all in the latter part of their career. So if you're sort of a young-ish goalkeeper, and as far as goalkeepers are concerned, I suppose that's arguably anything under 30, and Trafford's only 22, he's probably thinking, if this goes according to plan at a club like Newcastle, might have to wait a bit, maybe a season or so, depending on what happens with Pope, but eventually you can come in as number 1 and be quite undisputed. And I think that was going through the player's head in the summer when, as you rightly say, a bid was made. And there's no denying a bid was made and it was rejected. And I think at the time, and it's a very easy thing to do as a fan, you look at the Newcastle bid 11 or 12 million and Burnley want 15 million. How are we not just agreeing on 13.5, shaking hands and being done? But the reality is that structure is always so important. And my understanding of Newcastle's rejected bids, plural, for Trafford over last summer was that the guaranteed part of the fee, the easiness with which Burnley could meet the add-ons were not good enough. So they weren't convinced they were going to get anywhere close to 15 million. They thought the guaranteed fee plus a few add-ons might only take it to 9, 10, 11 max. And that wasn't really going to be enough. So it can be a bit misleading because obviously everyone assumes, because we've all played Championship Manager or whatever, that if you just up it a bit and up it a bit and up it a bit, But, your 15 million bid for Trafford is no good if it's actually a 6 million up front and 9 million if we win the Champions League. Because then Burnley are thinking, well, wait a minute, we might have to wait however many years for that. Whereas you'd probably rather take your 6 million up front, 3 million when he makes 10 appearances, and another 2-3 million if Newcastle make any form of European football. So it's a lower number, but it's a much better structure. And then again, Newcastle's desire to pay payment terms quickly in 1s, 2s, 3s, 4s, they're not there at the moment. So all of that lends itself towards a structure that was nowhere near what Burnley were looking for. When we get to either the end of this window or the summer, it might be a different situation. The price also might have dropped slightly. So I think Newcastle will be there, and especially if we get a goalkeeper going out first. And then, as I've said before, Kelleher at Liverpool is the other one that they really like. And there's a market opportunity there because Mamadashvili's coming in. Alisson may well stay. Even Mamadashvili might not be the number one next season. There's no indication I have yet that Liverpool plan on loaning Mamadashvili out to keep it as Alisson Kelleher through the 2025-2026 season. So Kelleher suddenly likely becomes a number 3. And that's not something that he's particularly comfortable with. He also doesn't really want to stay and be a number 2 either. He feels like he's done enough to go and be a number 1 somewhere. So we heard some reports that said Chelsea might come in the mix for Kelleher. That's not my understanding, but I am told that there is some substance to Newcastle and Kelleher, although at the moment it's probably fair to say that Trafford is a little bit higher up on their list of priorities.
Do you think there'd be a chance of Liverpool releasing Kelleher in the January window? Because it seems like if Dubravka is going to leave, we are going to want to, although we've got a kind of a stack of goalkeepers there. There's none that I would say Eddie Howe fully trusts, like he trusts maybe a Nick Pope and a Martin Dubravka. So there would be scope there to buy another goalkeeper. Is Kelleher someone that you think could potentially be got in January, or would we have to wait?
No, I think you have to wait. I think part of it is also the player wanting to, even if he doesn't feature that much, complete the season. And then because Mamadashvili can't be brought forwards, to my understanding anyway, there's a hole there from Liverpool's point of view. And it's not a hole that they would want to fill, because naturally, if they know Mamadashvili's coming in anyway, they've already filled the void. But if they then let Kelleher go too early, you have a situation where they're a goalkeeper short and they can't bring Mamadashvili in early. So I don't see Kelleher as being on the market now. But what I do think is that if Newcastle feel that they've got enough goalkeepers to get them through the end of the season, they could still wait for Trafford in the summer. And it would be a risk, of course, because you let Dubravka go, Pope gets injured, and you're suddenly in a situation where you feel like that's a weak link. And it might be the difference between finishing in the top 4 or outside the top 4. But there is a patience from Newcastle with the goalkeeper to get the right goalkeeper, because this isn't a backup. This isn't another one that's part of the seemingly 500 goalkeepers that they've got at the moment. This is a young, i.e. under 27, I would say, profile that could become the number 1 at Newcastle for 3, 4, 5, 6 years or whatever. So not buying a backup, not buying a possible potential, not buying someone that isn't already a proven product, buying someone that from day one can challenge the goalkeepers at the club and is young enough to grow into that number 1. And if you have to wait for that profile until the summer, I think they will begrudgingly do so. But if the player's available in January and they lose a goalkeeper, then I think that position, filling it, will be very high on the list of priorities.
So interesting to see how this all unfolds, and it does very much, like you just said, Ben, hinge on Martin Dubravka's decision, which Eddie Howe said he's going to leave up to the goalkeeper to make. So let's wait and see how that unfolds after the game tomorrow night. There's another player I wanted to throw your way, Ben, and it is Miguel Almiron. So lots of reports. Again, another player that we've been constantly talking about. As and when you come on the channel, Ben, because of your knowledge of his previous links with Saudi Arabia. But this time it seems to be not just Saudi, but the MLS that have taken some interest. And there has been some reports of MLS side Charlotte FC were close to signing him apparently in the summer. They've taken an interest in him again, and they're talking very publicly that the deal is pretty much already wrapped up. There was comments from Christian Fuchs, former Leicester left back, who you might well know quite well, confirmed in his talks with the media that there's a potential there of him signing, and that he would be a great addition to the club, and he'd look forward to working with him. As it sees is that they think that the deal is likely to happen. Other reports are saying that he wants to move to the MLS. So how do you see this deal with Miguel Almiron? Is it likely to get done? Is it likely to be the one to move on in January? And if so, who to?
A few things to say. One is that I'm not aware now that Saudi are active for Almiron. As you may remember, there was a verbal agreement with Al Shabab. The club-to-club fee was in place, and then, as you sometimes find with the Saudi deals, they go to the players after they've agreed something, which might sound slightly strange, and Almiron didn't want to go. Flash forward to Al Shabab not returning, and even though we saw some reports that Al Ittifaq might be interested, they don't have that kind of budget, and unless Damari Gray leaves and they get 5-6 million in, I don't see Saudi returning for Miguel Almiron, nor do I think that Almiron has changed his mind about Saudi Arabia. The Christian Fuchs comments were interesting because sources close to Charlotte downplay what he said in terms of how advanced the deal is at this stage. But as myself and Tom Bogart broke for Give Me Sport a few weeks ago, Charlotte had engaged in talks. At that point, those talks were only exploratory. And Charlotte came away with a very clear sense that Newcastle's price is about 8.5 million all in for Miguel Almiron. That's the sort of number that they're looking for. And Charlotte also feel that might be quite flexible because it will include the add-ons. So financially, it's doable. And it may be true that Almiron is keen on the move as well, but it's not quite as done as Christian Fuchs had suggested. But they're there, they're talking, and it wouldn't remotely surprise me to see that deal come off. I think you have Olympiacos as well, who we should mention, that have taken a very close look at Almiron as well. So it feels very likely that he may go in January. And this is a good example, again, of Newcastle needing to find a solution, wanting the money for PSR purposes or to reinvest in the squad. But ironically, you lose Almiron and you lack a squad player with a top attitude who can hit streaky patches of form. And arguably, along maybe with a long-term number one goalkeeper, maybe another defender, and then probably a young striker to effectively come in and challenge Isak / replace Callum Wilson. These feel like the priorities. But up there, if not above all of them, is find yourself a starting right winger or forward in the long run. And it's not to say that there's not other options, and it's not to say that people haven't come in patches and done well in that position. But I think and I never like to use the word upgrade because I don't think it's fair on a footballer, and there wasn't much upgrading possible on Almiron at his peak. He was phenomenal in that first half of the season when Newcastle ended up qualifying for Champions League. But the reality is Eddie Howe wants a starting right winger or right forward. So you let Almiron go, you probably don't find the name they're looking for, the Jared Bowens or the Anthony Elangas, all of which we know they've looked at in the past. You probably don't find that name in January. So again, you're going to lose one. It's going to be good financially, but you're going to leave Eddie Howe's squad thin. And I just wonder whether we're going to see a pattern in January of like Newcastle racking up a bit of money, getting a few players out, ensuring they're fine with PSR, everyone being happy, big plans if they make Champions League football for the summer. And then maybe Eddie Howe just feeling like, are we a little bit thin on the ground? And he'll have to just hope that people don't get injured. So this isn't always going to be Almiron goes, one comes in. Wilson may go, one comes in. Dubravka goes, one comes in. Because then you're already looking at 3 signings and you've maybe still spent more than you've brought in because each of these players are only going to command 10 million or under. And therefore, a combination of a Wilson fee, even in a best case scenario, let's just call it 15 million. It's probably not going to be that high now. A Almiron fee, 8.5 million. And a Dubravka fee, again, let's just call it that 6.4, although I'm not going to add these up perfectly because I've forgotten my own numbers that I gave, but let's just call that 25 million. Then what would Elanga cost? What would Bowen cost? What would a top young striker cost? Or a more experienced one like Richarlison, who Newcastle have discussed if the price drops significantly? Can they get a loan with an option or an obligation? Can they find a creative way around it? Yes. And what you spend in terms of bringing in versus what you spend in terms of outgoings are two different things on the books as well, because you have a situation where one can be put on your annual accounts, the other can be amortized. So there are ways around it, but I don't think Newcastle in terms of net spend will want to go significantly above what they bring in January, because they may want to save something for the summer. And then the other wide player that is very interesting is Tyler Dibling, who Newcastle looked at very aggressively under Dan Ashworth when he was still at the football club. And he's still there as well as a possibility. And despite Southampton's disastrous season, he's been very good so far.
Yeah, there's a few people that were asking that question about Tyler Dibling and whether that was a deal that could be potentially done. Is that one, again, is it another summer issue with Tyler Dibling, or is there a chance with Southampton, with all due respect to them, it looks like they're going to really struggle to stay in the Premier League this season? Would they not look ahead and think, right, if we can cash in now, it gives us some money to play around with. He's at the height of his performance, means we can get a little bit more money for him. Is there a potential that could happen in January? Because of the points that you made, Ben, is that if these players are to move, if Dubravka is to move, Miguel Almiron is to move, Newcastle United fans, and more importantly, Eddie Howe is going to want that replacement this month to play with.
Yeah, Tyler Dibling is an interesting character. He's very introvert and shy, and he went originally to Cobham from Southampton and returned almost immediately. So staying close to family is going to be one thing for him. He's still young, and the development requires some protection and some patience as well, despite the fact that on the field he's very confident. He can only get better, more team-orientated, more vocal. By team-orientated, I don't mean selfish. I mean team-orientated almost off the field. How does he fit into the dressing room? How does he come out of his shell? How does he show more leadership qualities? These kind of things. And even though the raw talent's there, there's a lot still to come out of the kid, both in terms of as a footballer and a human being. So the experience from Cobham showed him that he didn't want to rush and he didn't want to make any rash decisions, and that he wanted to stay in a system where he was a real focal point, because you can get lost in these big academies. So the success for whoever gets Tyler Dibling is going to be about not just showing the pathway, but that kind of personal touch, that there can be an instant relationship with the manager, that there is a club connection, that some of the more senior players can kind of put their arm around him, that he can acclimatise wherever he goes if he leaves Southampton. And all of these things make it quite tough in January, because I don't sense, knowing a bit about the player's backstory and his personality, that a mid-season move is going to be for him, even if Southampton wanted it to be. And then in a weird way, and how ridiculous is this to say, because Southampton are so bad and so adrift, they're already planning in many ways like they're down. Yeah. And what that means is that you don't really have a January, it's a Premier League fee, and summer, it's a you've been relegated fee. You have a Southampton are heading down. Everybody knows it. So no suitor in their right mind would offer them more than they need to in January, because everybody knows that the opportunity will be there and the price will drop in the summer. So I wouldn't want to be disrespectful to a club and its hardworking staff and ever say that they're like actively planning in a window, or they're actively planning on how they're playing for the championship yet. But you have to have that ability to brace yourself for the future, because recruitment teams do always work 2-3 windows ahead, and they will know in the manager they've signed, they will know in the players they've got who might stay. They will try and breed confidence, so whatever happens, they finish the season on a high for momentum to come back up, and they'll want to keep a core of players together to make sure if they do come up, they're stronger. And at this stage, I don't get the sense that Dibling is the kind of player to be saying, I don't want to be on a sinking ship. I don't want to play for this club. I'm better than this club. I can earn more elsewhere. I'm not sure that is innate in his personality. I think he's very loyal. He's very self-aware that Cobham life didn't suit him. So January for me doesn't feel likely for Dibling, but keep an eye on it on the summer because, as we've already said, when Dan Ashworth was at the football club, Tyler Dibling was very, very high up on his list of priorities.
Be interesting to see how that unfolds. There's a few questions here. I'm not sure how long we've got with you, Ben, but I think there's a few questions that people in the chat have put to you. So if we can, we'll ask you a couple.
Yeah, sure. I've got about 5 minutes, but then I do.
No problem.
Yeah, no worries at all, mate. Let me just. There was one I had to bring this up. Yeah, Mark Todd said this. It's not a question, Ben. I had to bring it up because it made me laugh. Mark Todd said, "Middle of summer, Ben wears a thick woolly jumper. -2 outside, Ben wears a t-shirt. Are you sure you're not a Geordie, Ben?"
This is my Edinburgh location at the moment, so even further north and over the border from Scotland. Even though it's freezing outside, my flat is at about 40 degrees. So I've got my heat t-shirt to bring me warmth.
Good
man. I thought it was a man. Good stuff.
Dean Latter asks an interesting question, Ben. He says, why are Newcastle not looking to utilise the loan market a lot more? Surely a try before you buy. We saw it with Lewis Hall, but obviously that was an obligation. But what do you think puts Eddie Howe and potentially Newcastle off from, utilising this loan market? Because, as you say, if we lose someone permanently, even if we brought someone in just for a few months with, say, an option where we could hand the player back if we didn't want them, why don't you think Newcastle are utilising that option as much as they could?
Partly because without European football, they don't have as many games this season. Partly because they don't want to throw what they perceive to be money at something without at least the option, I should say, of permanence. And I think that makes a lot of sense when you're Newcastle. Like if you look at Chelsea, before they signed João Felix permanently, they had him on loan. It was a very high wage. It was a very high fee. Brighton did the same with Ansu Fati. They broke their wage structure and I think he got injured. And then you're thinking, yikes, now we have a situation where we've lost money. And, try before you buy is one way of looking at it and a very valid way of looking at it. But there is also the opposite counterpoint of what if that player does well and you can't buy? They don't want to stay. Another suitor comes in. Then you have a situation where that player has been short-term. You've had to acclimatise them very quickly. Loans are always difficult for players to settle mid-season. And then at the end of it all, they may leave. And you go, okay. Even if it gave us a short-term boost, it's damaged our finances. We haven't got any long-term benefit out of it. Player hasn't grown in any value for us. So I think Newcastle's model isn't as ingrained towards loans for that kind of reason, unless they can get loan with an option or loan with an obligation, and it suits them financially. As you say, Lewis Hall was a good example. Mine and Pete's club, Leicester.
Don't do that, Ben. Don't do that.
We had Ademola Lookman, and he was absolutely sensational. And then at the end of it, Leicester desperately wanted to sign him, but it wasn't try before you could buy because he was so good for us that everyone wanted to buy him. So you can actually let another club try the loan and then watch if it works and then be like, okay, I've seen enough evidence now. So, why loan Marcus Rashford now? If you're not sure about the application, he's got high wages, let somebody else loan him. And if there's no obligation to buy, if he does well, you might be convinced to spend the money permanently and then you swoop in. And with Lookman, Leicester would have loved to sign him, but they couldn't financially. And it ended up setting them back. And look what he's doing now at Atlanta. And he went on and won the African Ballon d'Or. So it's tough for loans because, the reality, if we're putting it in layman's terms, is that a loan is like your rent. And a permanent signing is like buying a house. And rent can be very fun. It can be beneficial. It can be very short term. But after a certain point, as much as you may like where you live, you know that it's you paying somebody without permanence. And one day the landlord could kick you out. They could find a better tenant. They could up the rent. They could decide that you're not the right fit because your dog's too cute, or you spend too much time with your top off in the garden or something. And the mortgage is your sort of permanence. And I think that is the reality in Newcastle's mind, that they need to be able to own assets. Because look at what happens when they own an asset. They've turned Guimarães into a £100 million player, Isak into a £100 million player. Botman can't be far off, 70, 80, 90 million. And of course, Anthony Gordon as well is somewhere in the region of 80 to 100 million as well. And they're all owned by Newcastle. And you can bet your bottom dollar that Tino Livramento is rising in value. You can bet your bottom dollar that Lewis Hall is doing the same. So yeah, Eddie Howe probably doesn't want to disrupt the squad. He probably doesn't want to necessarily bring in somebody in alone unless he feels that they can be chucked into that first team and make an impact, as opposed to like a squad loan or a depth loan. And that can rock the boat a bit. There's nothing worse. Look at Raheem Sterling, join on loan. Brilliant. Another opportunity. Brilliant. Wait a minute. I'm on the bench again. Oh, well, I just got to wait out because I'm not going to be here for that long. Or I don't really care because this isn't permanent. So it's almost like I'm on notice. If he's not going to play me like he promised, then forget it. And that can be quite toxic as well. So this is about Eddie Howe policing culture. And it's partially, I think, also about Newcastle policing finance. And that's why I feel they haven't done many loans historically.
Yeah, no, that makes complete sense, mate. Now I've got a few names to throw at you, Ben, but I know you're very limited on time, so feel free to just say no or no. I don't think it's going to happen.
Let me at once, and we'll do one more, but then I really do have to run.
Yeah, no worries, mate. Well, the one, I suppose, the most interesting one that people are talking about at the moment, who has also been linked for Mark Shafto, is James McAtee. He's a name that's been linked with Newcastle recently. Maybe falls into the Tyler Dibling kind of bracket, but do you think there's anything in James McAtee? Do you think he'll leave City? Do you think there's a possibility he could come to Newcastle in January?
Yeah, Fulham was the club I heard rather than Newcastle. McAtee was brilliant in pre-season. I watched Man City in America and he set the world on fire. And you kind of thought City are going to learn the lesson from Cole Palmer and they're going to throw him into the first team and he's going to be brilliant for Man City. But pre-season can be deceptive sometimes. And for whatever reason, he's not getting that much game time at the moment. City's priority is to bring in, to find a midfielder, whether now or in the summer, and to find a versatile attacker that effectively can play in the De Bruyne role or the Haaland role, because that's what Julian Alvarez was looking for. And they might even sign a left back as well. I think Nuno Mendes linked with Man United as well is another possibility. And Hugo Viana incoming at Man City in the summer, a very big fan of the player and knows him well. It was Ruben Amorim that gave him his debut, but Hugo Viana was the sporting director there. So it feels like City's priorities are not about losing young talent or depth. And it's therefore going to be player driven if McAtee goes, because we know that when these players go to Pep Guardiola and say they want to leave, you have a situation where City don't tend to always stand in their way. But I don't think for sure it's like definitive yet. It's probably too early, a bit like Evan Ferguson as well at Brighton, that there will just be a loan for McAtee or a loan with an option. I think you might actually have the two extremes of either you stay or you leave permanently. And unfortunately for Newcastle, McAtee leaving permanently, he could be valued as high as 40 million. And I think that would prove out of Newcastle's budget. But I'd keep an eye on Fulham because they are considering an approach for a loan with either an option or an obligation closer to the tune of 25 or 30 million. And we have heard some reports of clubs from outside the Premier League as well, like Leeds United. But my understanding is that Man City feel if they are to loan him, and there is only a temporary nature to this, they feel that they can keep him within the Premier League and that his standard is good enough that he wouldn't have to drop down to the Championship. So I think Leeds McAtee is unlikely. Newcastle McAtee is possible, but there's nothing advanced. And the price point may be something that doesn't allow them to do that deal. But I think Fulham are really going to be the ones to watch in the next weeks if, and it is an if, City sanction a McAtee exit.
Yeah. And Ben, I know you've got to go, mate, and thank you so much for your time. It's always great having you on the channel. Just before you leave, I just want one name off you. Which, as a Newcastle fan, which name would you have on your list of potential incoming, outgoing? Who's the name that you think will be in the news for Newcastle, whether it be incoming or outgoing? What's the name you would keep an eye on?
Yeah, there's a few. I mean, I think there's a realistic possibility of Trafford. I just don't know yet if it's going to be January or summer. I would say it's pretty nailed on that Miguel Almiron will leave. And if Charlotte are to move, because of how their calendar falls, they're going to want that one done sooner rather than later. They're not going to want to wait until the summer for Miguel Almiron because of when their season starts. I think that there is a strong possibility that Newcastle look to bring in a striker. We wait and see again whether the right name, the right profile is apparent now. I wouldn't rule out them revisiting Jonathan David, who might be available for a nominal fee in January, but more likely all parties will decide that will be a free transfer a little bit later. Names I can rule out: Kolo Muani, Darwin Nunez. There's been some suggestion. That's not one that I've heard. Richarlison is the sort of surprise one that I'm told there might be a bit of substance to, but it would have to be a loan into an obligation at about 40 million. And that obligation would have to be contingent on Newcastle qualifying for Champions League or possibly European football. So it's difficult because it's not that Newcastle wouldn't move in January if they could, because there will be opportunities for example, a loan with an obligation. And you say, okay, that suits all parties. It's just the fact that the obligation, you still got to pay it one day. And the kind of names, as you'd expect, that they want all have 30, 40, 50, 60 million price tags. And at this stage, because Newcastle don't want to lose Gordon, Guimaraes or Isak, the main way that you can do that kind of spend and plan for something a bit bigger is with European or Champions League football. So difficult window for Newcastle. It's a bit like a championship club like Leeds, for example. Of course, things are going well and you want to be ambitious, but you can't yet tell a player currently at your team you're definitively going to get promoted, and you can't yet tell a new signing you're going to get definitively promoted. So you have to wait. And I think Newcastle is sort of in a similar situation where outgoings is the priority, because if they get that done, they won't be scrambling around the next PSR deadline. But they don't want outgoings only, because then Eddie Howe is left a bit thin. But they don't want to buy in January and find that they rush it and then they wish they'd waited till summer when maybe a higher caliber or a higher volume of targets become available. And this is why it's a little bit chicken and egg. It's not an easy market. It's a seller's market, not a buyer's market, January traditionally. So my prediction is there'll be one in for Newcastle, two at a push, and I think they'll lose three. And I think there's a realistic chance one of them's Dubravka. I think there's a nailed-on chance that one of them is Almiron, assuming that Charlotte continue their interest and with Olympiacos there. And then maybe one other surprise name. You know, getting rid of Wilson now is a risk if you've not got that striker lined up. But we know that it's not beyond the realms of possibility that he goes too. So, I don't have the mystic ball to tell you which three out and which two in, but it wouldn't surprise me if by the end of the window it's 2 or 3 out and it's 1 or 2 in for Newcastle.
Ben, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for taking the time to come and join us, and would love to have you on again before the window's out.
Yeah, look forward to it. Keep up the good work, guys. Always enjoy speaking to you, and we'll speak hopefully between now and when the window ends. And have a good night, everyone, and Happy New Year to everyone as well listening.
Happy New Year to you. You take care.
You, Ben.
Take care. Bye.
See you later. Great to have Ben on. Some updates there. People are coming in the chat. We've got over 300 in the chat. If you haven't, or you're just tuning in now, there's an update on Martin Dubravka. There is also an update on Miguel Almiron. Some updates there on 1 or 2 other players that Newcastle United could potentially be targeting. But whilst you're here, just click that like button. Only takes a second. It means the world to us. We've got over 300 in the chat. Let's get 300 likes in there. It makes a massive difference to the channel. And look, we've got lots planned over this January transfer window. Loads more transfer shows, loads more top guests like Ben and others. Lots more to discuss. There will be business. I'm convinced there will be business. Ben's saying the same. There's going to be movement. There's going to be players coming in. You're going to want to stick with Loaded Mag NUFC for that. There is no doubt about it. But great to have Ben on. A brilliant guest as well. Talk about lots of players, including James McAtee, that was just in the chat just a second ago. Update on the football. Forest are winning 1-0. Morgan Gibbs-White scored after 7 minutes. Still all to play for. we'll take a draw tonight. We'll take a draw there. Come on, Wolves. Come on, the Wolves. Take a point or 3. Help us out there. We're on a Champions League charge, boys. The way we're playing at the moment. So any results help. That is for sure. But Chris, I think we'll wrap up there. Really good chat.
Yeah, really, really good chat. And do you know what? I'll just very quickly look in the chat and just see if there was any. Do you know what? I wanted to ask you this question, Pete. This was at the start of the show, this question. I really, really like it. And I know we've briefly touched on it, but we'll throw this in just before the end. And apologies, everyone who's, come in with questions. Some really good questions in the chat. Some of them are for Ben. But as you could tell, Ben needed to shoot. So we tried to squeeze in as much as we could. So if we didn't come to your question, I am very sorry. But we will have Ben on again. And hopefully, if you have any more questions, please do let us know, and we'll try and get those in for Ben if we can. But the one I wanted to ask you, Pete, and I like this one from Friday81. He said this at the start of the show. Burn and Murphy are both having a purple patch now. Now we've spoken about purple patches, haven't we, Pete? And we always look back on that Miggy on that purple patch when Miggy couldn't stop scoring, and in retrospect, it may have been a good idea to let him go then. But Frieden81 asks, is it smart to sell them now? We all know they are not good enough for the top team. Now it's interesting that Frieden throws Dan Burn into that, for me anyway. But certainly Murphy is that like Murphy feels like a player, and we've spoken about this before, haven't we? A player who we wouldn't want to let go in terms of he's doing a job for us at the moment. We know that there's a possibility he may drop off, but it does bring up that purple patch conversation where you think, you'd rather Miggy go before Murphy, but if someone was to slap down that money, what would you think, Pete? And what would be the price be if, someone was to put the money down for Murphy, and also for Burn? If someone was to come in with an offer for Dan Burn, how much would you need to see in order to even consider letting Dan Burn go, if you would?
In all honesty, I don't think you're going to get a lot for Dan Burn. I think we paid 13 million for him. I think you'd be lucky to get 10 right now, 32 years old, if I'm being honest with you. And then you're looking at Murphy, who's just turned 30. I think in his pomp, the way he's playing right now, you could probably get 20 million for him. And I think that would be a fair fee. For me, I don't think either of them leave. I think if they leave, it'll be on free, on their contracts running out, on freeze, because I think, in my opinion, Newcastle United will maximise what they give to not just the team but the squad. You've got players there that not only give 110% for the club, they're supporters of the club. Dan Burn is from the area, lived there. Murphy's got family that are Geordies. Like, they know and understand what it means to play for Newcastle United. And if you're losing the likes of Dummett on a free, Gillespie this summer, you'll be losing as well. And losing someone like Jamal Lascelles, who's had 10 years service at Newcastle, knows the area, invested in that, club captain. You want to keep as many of those players around as possible. You don't want to be getting rid of them all in one big swoop. So I do think that neither of those players will leave, regardless of the money that's on offer. I think the only one that's likely to leave out the two is Murphy, but it would have to be something ridiculous. 20 million or more will get him out of Newcastle United. But it's whether there are teams willing to pay that. And we're forgetting the most important part is Murphy even going to want to leave? He loves it here. He loves playing for Newcastle United. Is he actually going to want to leave? That's the thing that I'm not sure about. But
yeah, no, definitely, mate. And the very last thing I want to ask you, Pete, and we haven't touched on it yet, but I thought with it being tomorrow, it's probably worth a conversation. So Villa James, UTFV, sorry. Bad news for Arsenal as Ethan Nwaneri will be out with a muscular injury. Unfortunately, he's picked up an injury and is going to be out for a few weeks, says Mikel Arteta. Big for us, guys. Yeah, that's absolutely right. So that's Saka and Nwaneri definitely out for tomorrow. But Tom Dixon asks, he's going for a 1-1 draw tomorrow night with Arsenal. What is your prediction for tomorrow, Pete?
It's hard to put a prediction on. If you're giving me a 1-1 there, I'm taking it and I'm running.
Oh yeah.
It's all day long. The thing for me is the players look tired on Saturday. They look really tired, and like I said, I think I said it in the review as well. It's not their fault. They've worked so hard, and it's natural for them to be tired. But teams and players get like this after a long run of games. So I'm a little bit worried, a little bit concerned that the tiredness is going to catch up with them. However, ability-wise and the way we play, I think we will create chances. I do believe we'll score tomorrow night. But I'm going to go along with Tom on this. I'm going to keep my prediction at 1-1. Arsenal are not freely scoring goals at the moment. They are obviously at home, so they're going to have the emphasis. But we saw the other night they struggled against Ipswich at home to score. I think they only won 1-0. They're losing players thick and fast, and we're tired. But Arsenal also looked tired on Saturday against Brighton. So it could be a game of who's got more fitness, who's got that more energy, that ability to get through another 90 minutes. It's a long slog for these players, but I'm going to go 1-1. And I gladly take that and take that back to St. James's Park, because at St. James's Park, I do believe we'll win.
Yeah. No, I to be honest, mate, I'm the same as you. Totally agree. You know, the players looked a bit tired. I know we're probably going to manage minutes on the weekends. I think we're going to see a very different Newcastle United squad, and rightly so as well. It gives players an opportunity, and also gives the first team players, if you like, or the vast majority of the first team players, the opportunity to rest up before that, important Wolves game at home in the midweek. So the following week, I mean. So it's difficult. It's difficult for me to give a prediction, like yourself, Pete, because I'd need to see the lineup, and I think as well I'd like to see the Arsenal lineup too. I think that will probably have an impact on what I think the result will be. But yeah, totally agree. 1-1. 1-1 for me would be a brilliant result. If we can't win, 1-1 would be a great result. Get the confidence up, scoring at the Emirates, and then going back to St. James's Park, knowing that it was a draw in the first leg, thinking all we've got to do is win this match. 90 minutes, win the match at home, we're through to the final. So yeah, I think 1-1 would be great.
100%. Come on. Right, people, we're gonna shoot, but my night's not over, boys. My night, lads and lasses, is not over.
Ooh.
Because if you happen to venture over to the 12th man race for Europe, you may see someone that you recognize very, very shortly. So pop over to 12th man now and check it out, and you may see a familiar face very, very soon. But look, people, great transfer show, great chat with Chris beforehand. Check the 20 minutes at the beginning of the show if you're just tuning in now. Me and Chris talked about some of the other links to players that we have been in the last few days in Newcastle United, Kyle Walker-Peters being one of them. So go and check that out. But I'm off to big up Newcastle United a little bit more. We'll be back with a reaction to the game against Arsenal tomorrow night. Come on, the boys. Let's do the business. And anything in particular you want to see us out with, Chris?
Oh, there's only one for me. Get them Arsenal tears going. It's time for the Isaac, mate.
Time for the Isaac. Yeah.
Even though I don't think he'll play tomorrow.
Yeah. He better.
I know. He just looked so tired, mate, didn't he? He did look tired, but I hope he's in the starting 11, but
he will. He'll be there. Let's give it a bit of the Isaac. We're out, people. You take care. See you soon.
Sir.